BCBA test prep, and how the field has changed. These are just some of the topics that we get into today on the BDS podcast. Welcome to the BDS podcast. I am your host, Rose Griffin, and this is episode 3. I had a delightful conversation today with Dr. Stephen Eversole and Donna Meller. If you don't know Steve, he was inspired to become a behaviorist in a high school psychology class after reading Beyond Freedom and Dignity by B.F. Skinner. He remained inspired, receiving his MA in Applied Behavior Analysis from Western Michigan University in 1984 and his EDD in Special Education from the University of Kentucky in 1995. That same year, Steve began dabbling in computer-based training, and in 1998, he founded Behavior Development Solutions, makers of the CBA Learning Module Series, CE products, and other training materials. He's practiced behavior analysis for over 34 years, working with a variety of special needs populations, including individuals with autism, developmental disabilities, and severe emotional disturbances. Steve has also taught classes on behavior analysis and presented research findings at professional conferences. He is just a wealth of information, and I just wanted to say thank you, Steve, for creating the BDS modules because they helped me pass the test on the first time. I really appreciate all of your hard work in the field. I had such a great conversation meeting Donna Meller. If you don't know who Donna is, she is the co-founder of Pass the Big ABA Exam, a pioneer in interactive BCBA, BCABA exam prep, a board-certified behavior analyst, and former Broadway performer, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Since its founding in 2012, Donna has emerged as a leading authority in ABA exam prep as co-creator and author of the revered PTB ABA Study Manual. In addition to being an entrepreneur, Donna is the CEO of Behavioral Intervention Specialists of Los Angeles, and this is an agency that specializes in the treatment of children with autism and other developmental disabilities. I found this to be so fascinating about Donna. She recently started Broadway for Autism, an organization dedicated to creating access and inclusivity in arts education for individuals on the autism spectrum, spanning the arts-related professions. I just love that passion, and I think that's what you will hear in this episode is the passion that Steve has and the passion that Donna has for the field of ABA. Let's get on in to this episode.
You're listening to the BDS podcast by Behavior Development Solutions, online at bds.com, your source for evidence-based training in applied behavior analysis since 1998. From premier curriculum supplement and exam prep to RBT training and continuing education, including live webinars and more.
Welcome to the BDS podcast, episode 3. I'm your host, Rose Griffin, and we have an amazing show for you today. We have with us Dr. Stephen Eversole and Donna Meller. Thanks so much for joining us. It's great to have both of you on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with, can you tell us each a little bit about you and your journey into the field?
Okay, I'll jump in here. Well, way back in 11th grade, I read the book Beyond Freedom and Dignity in high school. And so that introduced me to behavior analysis. And so at that point, I was sold. And then I went to University of Pittsburgh, which was a behaviorally oriented program at the time. And then Western Michigan University for my master's degree immediately after that. And then after that, I worked at Behavior Research Institute, which later became the Judge Rottenberg Center, which a lot of people know. I was there for about a year. And then I went to Denver State School, a developmental center that has subsequently been closed. And then after that, I decided it was time to go back and get my doctorate degree. So I went to the University of Kentucky and got my doctorate in the special education department there. After that, I got a job with Columbus Medical, working in at the Arlington Developmental Center in Tennessee, where we had a wonderful large group of behavior analysts that I worked with. One of them was Dr. Pat McGreevy, who, after I had taken a workshop on online training, or not online training, but instructional design, I was talking to Pat, and he said, well, why don't you develop something to help the CBAs pass the board exam in Florida? The CBA was the precursor, of course, to the BACB. So I got started on that, and that was just after I got started working on that, the board came into existence, and the board, of course, is a national and international board. So it was, I was in the right place at the right time and talking to the right people. And so I continued to work as a behavior analyst for another 10 years or so. And then when BDS started to get big enough, I finally went full time, and that was in 2004. So.
Oh, wow. That's very fascinating that that Pat said that to you, and then you just kind of ran with it, because it's so needed. And actually, the way that I became in touch with BDS modules in your company was I used the BDS modules to pass my test. So I posted that all over social media because that's kind of my jam and how I disseminate. And now I'm talking to you. Well, that's really interesting. Okay, so that's interesting. And then from a small business owner's perspective too, it's interesting to know how long you also continued to work clinically after you had started with the modules. So about 10 years. Okay, that's cool. Thanks for.
Yeah, well, it was close to 10 years. Well, probably about 7 years from the time I actually sold my first module to the time I actually quit my full-time job, because I had a family at the time. I couldn't take a chance on not having a stable income. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. So fascinating.
I recruited my mother to do customer service.
Yes. No.
Sort of thing, you know.
Yeah, no, it's fun to hear how you bootstrapped it, because I have a business ABA speech, and I just left my full-time clinical job in May of 20 years working in the schools. So it's just interesting and inspiring to hear that. Thanks for sharing. Okay, on to Donna. So Donna, can you tell us a little bit about you and your journey into the field?
Well, I'll just warn you, it is way less impressive than Steve's journey into ABA. But I think I'll win the Weird Trajectory Award for sure. Well, I was an actress.
Wow.
Yeah, but just a real natural path into applied behavior analysis. I was an actress my whole life. And I went to undergrad for theater, and was right out of college, booked a Broadway show, and was living in New York, working on Broadway. And I don't know why, but I went to grad school at the same time. I did not study behavior analysis. I studied psychology. That's where the transition becomes a little bit more natural, but I was still acting. So my graduate school work was, they made a lot of exceptions for me at NYU. They were kind of, I guess they just thought it was so neat that I was in a Broadway show at the same time, that they didn't really hold me to the same standards, like all the processing groups and all the things that happen at night in a graduate program I could not attend to. So I finished my coursework, and 10 years later, I wrote a thesis because I was acting. And to be honest, I don't know that I would have ever finished my thesis or finished that master's, because I was, in fact, a flaky actress. But because I fell into behavior analysis, I had to, because, I couldn't sit for the exam without the master's and all of that. But basically, I was in a Broadway tour at the time that 9/11 happened, and my tour closed. And so it forced me back to California, because I had subletted my apartment in New York, and honestly, just ran into an old friend at a party who had just finished her PsyD, was working on her BCBA, and had started an ABA agency. This is back when you didn't really need a BCBA to be doing the high level work. And I said, well, I've got this sort of master's that just thesis pending master's, and I don't know anything about autism. I don't know anything about ABA. And so I just started working for her. I think I was, just going into the homes, some school cases. Didn't know anything about it. Can't say that the training was sufficient, but, sort of discovered this new thing. And I knew a little bit about ABA because obviously a master's in psychology certainly touches on all of the different schools of thought. But I can't say it ever drew me. I can't say it was in the thing that excited me when I'd heard about it. I wish I could say, yes, behavior is running through my veins, but it really wasn't. I was a very psychodynamic thinker, especially as an actor. Everything was like, oh, it's in the stars. And, but I started doing this work and obviously enjoyed it very much. Really kind of found that being theatrical and animated was like a superpower. Working with the kids. And so that was really fun. It was also incredibly humbling because there I was being bitten and scratched and hit. And I had literally just 3 months prior starred in a Broadway show. And I was like, do you know who I am? So that was incredibly humbling for me and much needed humility. And then, started to realize I had to finish this thesis because I wanted to go back to school. So I did. I went back to do the coursework. At the same time as I was writing my thesis. And in fact, my thesis was, oh gosh, I wish I remember the title of it. I should have looked it up. But basically, it was an idea on how behavior analysis was lacking some of the drama therapeutic aspects of drama therapy. And drama therapy was lacking the empiricism of ABA. But if both could somehow amalgamate, there would be something really special there. But this is back in the day where I really was so hell-bent on being clinical and being like the leaders and sort of wearing the role of a behavior analyst rather than actually being one, that I really thought, well, there's no room for creativity. We have to be stuffy and serious, and this is science, and drama is drama and not science. I've changed my philosophy a lot since those days. But yeah, I fell into it. I obviously sat for the exam, worked very hard. It was not an easy feat for me. I was still transitioning into a behavior analytic thinker. So even though I can say that I passed on the first try, I did not have a family at the time. I did not have any other responsibilities, and I studied a lot, probably more than a behavior analytic thinker would have. And then several years later, after a fateful coffee date with my partner, Priya Runyon, we just at the coffee shop decided we wanted to do an interactive prep course, like a workshop with people that come and see us and write a little manual. And here we are. We just celebrated our 11th anniversary on Friday. And to kind of like Steve said, I still work clinically. I think the need to do both has passed, but I'm still afraid. I'm always just like, is it going to last? Is this going to go on? Plus, I really like having one foot in the clinical world just to kind of keeps me more connected to the student experience. Or maybe I'm just crazy and I don't want work-life balance. That could be it. But yeah, I guess that's the short of it or the long of it.
No, I love that. I love that. I didn't know anything about your background. I always think that's really fascinating. I'm a speech therapist and BCBA, but I always think it's really fun when I meet people who are in our space and are also a musician or also in something that is creative, because I definitely can tell you that that idea of being animated and just kind of putting yourself out there in therapy, especially with younger learners, is probably, like you said, it seemed like you were pretty popular in therapy. You probably felt confident, doing some of those naturalistic kind of, play-based interventions. So fascinating. Love that. So cool. Okay. So can you share your philosophy in regards to test prep?
Okay, so my philosophy is that we're here to make better behavior analysts, not to help people pass the exam, or at least not to just help them pass the exam. And this is something that I have had. I've been in conversations with people who kind of look down on what we do. These, a few of them were luminaries in the field that think, oh, you guys are just, you're not really teaching. You're just helping people pass the exam. And I always, in those conversations, I've emphasized, well, we are here to help them pass the exam, but that's not all we're here to do. And so that's the big thing that I want to get across there. And also, the BCBA exam, I believe, is largely a valid exam. I think they do as good a job as could be done within the limitations of a multiple choice exam. And going beyond that, where they're actually acting out, or put into actual scenarios, and they're responding as assessed under those circumstances, is something that I think will come at some point, but there's a lot of complications for them to do that. It may be that we end up doing that before they do. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. That we are here to make better behavior analysts, not just help people pass the exam. And I know Donna believes the same way, but I'll let her speak for herself.
I do. And you taught me that, Steve, because I know we'll probably talk about how we met, but for sure, I look up to the scientific approach that you take, and a lot of things you have said to me over the years have, I'd had to run home and look things up and understand your point, which I agree with wholeheartedly. I have the same idea as Steve. I don't want us to be a shortcut to passing the exam. I think I would be sad if the legacy was, I'm not a great clinician, but I used PTB and I passed. Like, I would just hate to hear that on the streets, on the hard streets of Hollywood. But something that is important for me, in addition to, having sort of a behavior analytic approach to learning and really applying those principles, which, as I shared, I was a late bloomer to loving. But now that I do, it excites me. And so what I aspire to do is inspire our students to love the science also. And they don't always at this stage of the game. At this stage of the game, that's my dog. He has a lot of feelings about science as well. But to inspire people to love the science and be motivated to study because of that affection, because I feel like we get more done when we actually enjoy the thing that we're doing and not see it as a chore. I know it is, and I don't mean to sort of diminish that it is something that people have to do for job security and promotions and all of that good stuff. But I have found that my students who get excited about it, who I can sort of infect with excitement if they don't have it to begin with, they do better because they start to love it and they seek the knowledge. The knowledge is reinforcing versus passing the exam is reinforcing. I mean, of course, that is also very reinforcing. It's like the greatest day of your life. I know that's it, right? And I've been cast in a Broadway show. Nothing felt better than that passing score email.
Yes,
I think those are sort of my goals, if you will, or inspirations.
I love that. And I think on the a different episode, we were talking about when I took the test, I did not find out immediately. Nowadays, if you take the test, you find out immediately if you passed or failed. But now,
failed for our results.
Back in the day, it took a month or something, and it was a phone call or something random. But I was just filled with such dread. I think I did a 3-month study schedule, and it was, I've been certified about 12 years. So it was all about the BDS modules and the Cooper book, and I stuck to my study schedule, which now I heard the BDS website helps you kind of do a scheduler, which I think is interesting. But I had a schedule, I was ready to go. And I think, as somebody who's taken the test, I also passed the first time. I think once you get through the overwhelm of passing the test, obviously you're so passionate about the field and about the science of ABA, but then it allows you to be that lifelong learner to then get really into the science. Because I feel like when you're a new professional, you're really just dipping a toe into like, what does it even mean to be a BCBA? Like you were saying, Donna, you started to become an analytical thinker because your background, was different. So that was a transition for you. But I think that really kind of gives you insight into like, okay, this is ABA and now we're going to apply it. And then the rest of your career, you're just modifying, tweaking, learning new things as the research comes out. So I think both of you, I just think it's really fascinating that you're so passionate about helping people at that stage in the game, because we really do need all your support during that time. So I'm curious, Steve, can you tell us a little bit about the state of the field when you started out in it?
Yeah, well, let's see. I'll kind of date myself here. The first ABA conference I went to, and of course I say ABA because the I didn't exist yet. It was the Association for Behavior Analysis before it was Behavior Analysis International. That was about 82, I think. I went to my first conference, and there was about 1,000 or so academicians in the field. At that conference in 82, or maybe this number's coming from 83, if my memory serves me correctly, there was about 700 people there. Now, this is, the big national ABA conference, and that was pretty much everybody in the country, that maybe a few hundred more that didn't come. But, that was the size of the field. Mostly academicians and people working in developmental centers. And as for state and regional organizations, there was, I think, FABA and Babbitt, I think, were the only ones. And I'm sure they had, I know Babbitt, even when I went to Babbitt, the first few years I went to Babbitt, I think it was under 100 people. And, now you have some of these state and regional conferences have more people than ABA or ABAI did way back, way back, well, I guess it is 40 years now, but still. So the field has grown incredibly. And as I remember it, and maybe this is just my memory looking through rose-colored glasses as a young professional, but boy, it was a very jam-packed with a lot of real hard science. Every presentation was data or something, a real heavy theoretical issue. And to be honest, I really missed that. And it seemed like everybody, we were talking behavior analysis. Now when we go to conferences, like we talk about everything else but behavior analysis, except in the presentations. But, in the hallways, in the social gatherings and so on, it seemed to me that we were all talking behavior analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And then also Skinner and Keller they had banquets back in those days. And I remember I got to, my claim to fame was to direct B.F. Skinner to the men's room, to tell him where it is. So I was very, very proud of that. That's my big
Rightfully so. Rightfully so. Yeah.
Yeah. But I will tell this story though. He was such a humble man. Everybody wore, their tags on their, kind of like they do now. And it was my job as a volunteer at the conference to make sure that people had their badge. And if they didn't have their badge, I was supposed to tell them to go get it. Well, B.F. Skinner was going out to the men's room, and he didn't bring his badge with him. And he said to me, is it okay that I didn't bring my badge? And I said, yes.
For you.
Yeah. So
you're like the hall monitor.
Yeah.
I was, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I love to hear those stories about that you were able to meet him and how small the conferences were. It's interesting as a speech therapist, when we have our national conference, which is ASHA, there are so many people. There are like 20,000. So when I go to ABAI, which I used to do more so when I first started my business, that weekend's so hard for me, Memorial Day weekend. I wonder if was it always on Memorial Day weekend? Do you remember way back it was? Okay. It's hard for me to get there.
As far back as I go anyway.
Okay.
2 years before me, there was the Midwest Association for Behavior Analysis. I think that was still probably Memorial Day weekend, but I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's always hard for me. But what I think is so interesting is when I go to that conference, it's so much smaller, comparatively speaking, to speech therapy, that I remember when I went to ABAI when I was in San Diego, and I'm with Dr. Mary Barbera. She's a friend of mine, and we're, at the bar after the conference, and people were there, and she introduced me to Dr. Sundberg. And it's just nice because it does have like a smaller feel, especially kind of in the online space and all that. So interesting. I love hearing all those stories. That's really, really fun. So Donna, do you want to share with us just the state of the field when you started out?
Yes. Well, very different. For me, my claims to fame was having met Steve Eversole at a conference the first time I went. I do have a funny story as far as how how much of an outsider I really was the first time I went to a conference. I had briefly worked for a company while I was waiting to take the exam. And my boss made me a business card that had my name, the fact that I had my MA, and then it said BCBA and in parentheses, exam pending. Wow. And I took it to this conference proud, like I am almost you guys. So, and as I was meeting people, and I'm social, so I didn't know anybody. I went by myself, and I was just like, hi, I don't know who you are. And I had given my card out a few times. As an actress, you don't really have a business card to pass around. So I was really excited to exchange business cards. That was cool. And I think like the third person I handed it to looked at it and was like, your card's unethical.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I'm sure you got called on that.
I figured that out pretty quickly. So I had to like come home and call the boss and can you please remove this off my card and don't give this to anybody. But the state of the field was, I think it was that point, it was before all the insurance laws had passed, but it was as if like the psychological world had been bitten by the ABA bug. At least that's what it was feeling like. And just agency after agency was popping up. And if you look at the graph on the BCB website, or at least the one that Dr. Carr typically presents at conferences, how the slope started to go up. It was just like minutes before it was, that super high rate. But it was already, escalating. And so it was just kind of, everybody was sort of talking about it, but it was still in the middle of being very clinical. So if you didn't understand and you didn't fit in and you sat in on a symposium as a student, you could absolutely feel like you did not just study this. You did not just finish coursework because they're talking about something else. And it was intimidating and it was exciting because it, at least for me, I felt like I want to attain this. I want to sit in these rooms and I want to understand these people. And that's for me, I was just starting to learn, who the thought leaders were. I knew names. I didn't really pay attention initially, like who was still alive, who was who. And then somebody would, I remember seeing Brian Iwata in a bar and not knowing that it was him and somebody saying, oh, that's him. And me just being like, that's the functional analysis guy. And then sort of at that point, starting to learn, like, these are the people you should go listen to, finding the names and just sort of when I was asking questions, but mostly it just sort of felt like the moment that things started to shift in the field. And so I do feel like I was sort of in the middle, right? When it started to not just change to more quantity, but maybe at the point where quality started to be a little bit threatened because in the next, 10 to 15 years, a tone started to shift from, like Steve was saying, from talking science to talking, how do we improve all the people in the field? It's sort of the feeling changed. But yeah, I guess that was it. It was very exciting and intimidating and overwhelming and scientific and nerdy in the good sex of the way. And this is the day where, you were told by your employers not to wear jeans to conferences. So there was like, I remember going with my mom to shop before my first conference and just being like, what do people wear? Like, I didn't even have slacks. Like I was I literally I had no need for quote unquote professional business attire. And it's obviously much different now, but yeah.
I do feel like I just went to OHABA, our Ohio conference. Dr. Heward was there. He presented right in front of me, and he actually stayed for my talk and was very interactive. I was like, is this happening right now? It was very exciting. But I do think when I was thinking about my outfit for OHABA, when I was presenting in front of hundreds of people, I do still think it's more professional. I don't know. I guess I'm just going back to between speech and BCBA. But if I'm going to a BCBA conference, I do think people really do tend to still dress up and be more formal than other conferences, but that's just kind of my experience. Interesting. Well, that's just fascinating to hear about how it was, when you got into the field. And you're right, it has just grown so much. And I'm sure that there will just be growing pains because our field is just growing rapidly. And maybe the things that were important back then, maybe other things are taking the forefront. I do like the way that they have the symposium set up. And when I go to ABAI or some of those larger conferences, I always like to go to things that, like you said, like maybe I never learned about this. I remember when I was in San Diego, I went to things about matrix training and heard Dr. Sarah Frampton talk. I don't even know if she had her PhD back then, but, really interesting things. And I was learning about ACT and just stuff that I did not study, in my coursework. So I guess that idea of, being an ACE provider, right? We have to go beyond the task list. So those are always interesting times to maybe, I always do that at conferences to learn about things that maybe I don't know a lot about, and things like that. So I'm curious now, because you had talked about how you met Steve. So where did you guys meet? How did your professional relationship start? And then how has it evolved over time?
Donna, you want to start with this?
Yeah, I'll start because I don't think you remember exactly it, but I'll be honest. It's kind of foggy for me too. I reached out to Steve when we were starting PTB. I don't remember why I did that, but I do remember that you were incredibly generous, and you had, now Pri and I had both done BDS modules and loved it, and obviously passed the exam. So I think for me, I wanted to let you know that we were doing this thing. I didn't think it was going to be anything. I thought we were going to have some classes in Los Angeles. And so I wasn't letting you know as a warning, like, oh, we're coming, because I did not anticipate that we would, even exist in the same space as you. But I reached out to kind of say, we're starting these live classes. And, I don't remember the exact questions, but I know that it was to seek advice, and it was more in that way. And you gave us our access to BDS modules back. It's funny because I had it on a CD-ROM. So it wasn't that you like redid my account, or maybe I had a CD-ROM and then you had I don't remember. I mean, this is a long time ago, but in any event, you gave us our access back, and you shared with us that you had introduced a pre and post test. I mean, you had talked about so many things, and we're really, really generous with the information. So that was the first meeting. And then I would go to conferences throughout those first few years. We didn't have booths or anything. We were just building. And I would always stop by and talk to Steve. And somehow that shifted to us talking on the phone when we would have task list transitions. And I don't remember the reasons for picking up the phone and calling, but I remember emailing him and saying, do you have time for a quick call? And those calls were never quick. We'd always talked about everything else. And then next thing I know, we're at conferences and we're sharing meals and on boats with our significant others and sitting in lobbies till 3:00 in the morning while our significant others are in the hotel rooms and people are coming up. At this point, I'm also recognizable, a little more recognizable, and people coming up and going, wait a minute, aren't you guys the competition? So it's, I wouldn't say it's an unlikely friendship because we have the same interests, but it's definitely lovely that it emerged, and that, I'm especially grateful to Steve for just being so hospitable in the space, but also sharing his wisdom and his insight. And he's just an amazing human being. So I can talk to Steve literally about anything. It doesn't have to be exam prep. I just enjoy his company very much.
Well, I feel the same, obviously. And Donna was very, very, friendly, and we, seem to cooperate so well. And if I could tell a story that I think kind of set the tone for my attitude about this, is very early on when I was doing BDS and Jose Martinez Diaz was doing the guided review. I was at FABA, and Jose, in his very friendly, gregarious way said to me, because I had known, actually I had met Jose back in Tennessee when I worked there in the mid 90s. I said to him, he approached me and he said, Steve, we are competitors, but let's not compete. Let's have a friendly cooperation. And I said, okay, Jose, that's really a great way to look at it. And so we, the competition has always been friendly. And so So then it was with Donna as well, and I think for most of our competitors in the field, we're not cutthroat. Um, and and Joel, my director of behavior develop or director of business development, when I hired him, he had talked about some things that we could do that was a little bit more competitive, and I said to him, I said, Joel, this field isn't really like that. It's like it's more friendly, and after a little while, he learned what the field was like, and he said, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of friendly competition. So I'm glad that we're in a field like that at this point. Now we'll see what happens in the future. I'm sure with Dawn and I it'll be fine, but I mean, and I think with other behavior analysts in the field, I would expect the same. But we also have some people coming in from outside the field that I don't know whether they'll have the same attitude or not.
Yeah, that's so fascinating to hear. And I love just that idea, Donna, that you reached out to Steve and that you were receptive to that. I had a similar thing happen to me when I started in the field. I reached out to Dr. Mary Barbera, and I talk about verbal behavior, and she does too. And she's just this really accomplished person. And when I was starting out in the online space with my business 5 years ago, I just reached out to her. I emailed her, and I was like, okay, I talk about all the same things. I'm a speech therapist. This is who I am. And I enrolled in her courses, and then I've been in her membership, just kind of staying in there. And we've done so many collaborations, and she's done videos with, her son and our products that we sell. And so it's really been like, for me, like a nice mentorship type of experience where we're kind of in the same space, but she, in my situation, she's so far ahead of what I'm doing, that she's been doing this for so long that she really is like a mentor to me. And we do have like texts, and then we talk, and we do collaboration. So it is really nice to have somebody in that space, because what we're doing and what you guys are doing is so different and so unique that there are not a lot of people who really understand what you are doing and what you're trying to do in the field. So it's nice to have that relationship and somebody to talk to. I really love hearing about that. So what are your hopes for the field going forward?
Okay. So for me, it's mostly maintaining and improving the skills of behavior analysts, maybe doing some advanced training. We do want to get into that area. And then another area that we've gotten into 2 years ago, we started the Center for Behavior and Climate, and I hired a full-time environmental specialist. And so we're in that space now. We have several courses, most of them free courses, up on at the Center for Behavior and Climate. Just Google Center for Behavior and Climate, and they'll bring you there, or it's climate.bds.com. And so that is a personal passion of mine, and climate change is the biggest behavioral problem that we have, and it has very severe consequences. And I think we as behavior analysts need to be in that space and have an impact. And there is a fair amount of research on climate action, but it's being done by behavioral scientists who are not ABA people. There is some literature in the ABA literature, and it is growing, and that is starting to gather steam. And if you look at the SIG, what is it? Behavioral. Oh shoot, name escapes me right now. But anyway, there's a sustainability SIG, and then there's also a behavioral responsibility SIG. And Susan Schneider and Andrew Bonner and Mark Olivocious, and are just a few of the people, Tracy Sehan, are some of the people that are doing work in that area now. And I think that's an area that I certainly hope will grow and gain influence.
Interesting. I'll have to look at that. I haven't heard of that. So that's another thing that's interesting about ABAI, or when you go to those conferences, they have those special interest groups, and sometimes they have meetings, and you can kind of bebop around and say like, oh, wow, look, this is ABA. It's a lot of things that maybe we don't see all the time. So I teach the ethics class here at Kent State. So I always talk about that too, how, it is a broader scope and you may be applying it one way, but there are a lot of people doing a lot of different things. So I'm glad that you bring that up, and I'm excited to check that out, Steve. Thanks for sharing. Donna, what are your hopes for the field going forward?
So I guess for me, I would love for just the general conversation to, to equalize a little bit, right, or even out a little bit. Right now, there's just a lot of, it feels divided in some ways. It feels divided in terms of inclusivity, diversity, and so it feels like another growing pain is happening where it's uncomfortable and it's scary. But I think it's headed in the right direction. So my hope is that we do arrive at a place where everybody feels included and important and heard. And I also, and the other part of it is just the supervision piece. I see there's so much focus on improving supervision, improving the quality of the, behavior analyst in the field, the applied behavior analyst. And so I just hope we get to a place where we can be proud of all of the things that we're all doing, rather than in this sort of defensive damage control space that I feel like we're in. There's it feels like a rebrand is going on, and that's always scary from any business standpoint, but it's especially scary when it involves, people and human beings and treating people fairly. And so finding the space between, what is perceived as abusive in our field versus what is perceived as inclusive and, more compassionate towards the individuals that we treat, as well as to the diverse individuals that work in our field. So that's something that I hope happens, so that it doesn't feel uncomfortable and scary. And then, for me personally, I'd love to find more research and do some more research and just on how people learn. And there is stuff that exists, but there's not a lot, but maybe someday I'll do a little writing or read more reading. I don't know if I could do any more reading, but I will fit in more reading so I could explore just maybe a comparative analysis of different types of learning theories and help people sort of improve the process of learning something that may feel abstract or dense and not really necessarily, may not feel like it's related to what they're doing in the field, making things like tests. I don't want the test to be easier, so I really want to make that clear. I don't want the pass rate to be higher. I want everybody to pass, but I don't want it to be 100%. You know what I mean? So, right. And every bit of research that I've done is that standardized tests, they have these, moderate pass rates. So that I'm okay with, but I would like it for it to be less aversive for people that could do it, can do it, should do it. But yeah, I guess that's it. I just want us to be happy, and I want us to all get along. If that's not too Pollyanna, but that's what I want.
Yeah, no, I agree. I see all that too.
I don't think ABA is the only field that's going through this. I mean, this is going on in the theater world as well, and in the world, and in politics, it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. So I just want to feel less anxious, and I just hope it happens in my lifetime. That's what I hope for all of mankind.
Yes, I love that. I love that. In your lifetime. That's a good timeline. I think that will work.
Yeah, exactly. Is that a good measurable goal? Yeah, that felt a little pageanty, but it is true for me.
Yeah. No, I love that. Love to hear that. Is there anything else that either of you would like to share with our listeners, or do you think any final words? You guys shared a lot. Just want to check in and make sure. Good. Thumbs up.
Yeah, think of anything.
Okay, great. Well, it was absolutely amazing to talk to both of you. You are doing such important work in the field. And I love just hearing about each of your businesses, how it started, how the field was when you first started, because I think each of us has kind of a different experience. So I love hearing all those stories. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you
so much.
For more information about BCBA exam prep and curriculum supplement, RBT training, CE courses, including live webinars and more, please visit BDS.com. We know that learning is a lifestyle, not a destination, and we thank you for including us in your journey by listening to this episode of the BDS podcast.